Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War breaking news update, although it's not really breaking anymore. Everyone seems to know about it. Concerning the Ukraine War and concerning General Zaluzhny, who was commander in chief and has been moved aside by Zelenskyy, being reported as being sacked or fired in many outlets. I'm not sure that's a correct way to interpret it. We'll talk about that a little bit in a second. Sorry about the volume and audio on my previous video. It's all gone a bit nuts. I don't know what my laptop's done. Nonetheless, this is the best I can do at the moment. So, what's happened? Zaluzhny has been fired, as Tim White says here, as Ukraine's commander in chief. Remains to be seen if he's really happy with the decision. This comes after Volodymyr Zelensky. I think there's been like an 8-minute video he's released since then. But he said, I met with General Valery Zaluzhny. I thanked him for the 2 years for defending Ukraine. We discussed the renewal of the armed forces of Ukraine. Um, discussed the renewal that the armed forces of Ukraine require. We also discussed who could be part of the new renewed leadership of the armed forces of Ukraine. The time for such a renewal is now. I propose to General Solution to remain part of the team. We will definitely win. Glory to Ukraine. So the inference that I'm getting out of that is that uh, we don't know whether Zelensky will remain. He's been offered some kind of position. Don't know if he'll take it. Uh, but also that uh, he's been part of selecting the people that will kind of replace. I don't think it's just him. I think there's going to be a clearing out of the previous kind of hierarchy and a reshuffle of the people there. Um, but nonetheless, Tim White went on to say taking over as Ukraine's top soldier is Colonel General Alexander Syrsky. Now, Syrsky is not as popular as Zaluzhny, and that will be an issue. Lots of people love Zaluzhny. I'm a big fan of him, but I keep saying I don't know enough about the reality of actually what goes on behind those closed doors and how good he is. I mean, you can look at the counteroffensive and say that that didn't succeed as well as it should have done. So, was he to blame for that? But then there are other successes, that he was responsible for. So, it's a difficult one, really. He's highly respected, says Tim White, talking about Sersky. Actually, I think he got into a bit of hot water over some decisions made around Bakhmut. Although I think Bakhmut was in the end a successful defense, and it attrited the Russians. It destroyed Wagner. So I don't know. You could go either way with Cisco, and that some people still think that Bakhmut was a bit of a disastrous decision. Anyway, he's highly respected and is said to have managed the defense of Kiev and the offensive operations in Kharkiv. Zelensky said the new management team will take over the leadership of the armed forces, and then he lists the management team here with some of these names I'm not too aware of, to be honest. But if you want to know who's been appointed in the management team working under General Syrsky or Colonel General Syrsky, there it is. Now, this has been widely reported across mainstream media outlets. He and talking about how there's been this fractured relationship that's actually gone on since before the war began. Some people saying it's kind of political, politics getting involved in military, and that's got not good news. I thought this was an interesting paragraph in the Guardian representation of the events. Zaluzhny was highly regarded among troops on the front line, true, with a reputation for bravery, modesty, and good humor, and he became a cult figure in Ukrainian society more broadly. Now, this is, I think, spot on and outside of Ukrainian society. He's a bit of a cult figure. People absolutely love him, but do they love him on account of the actual decisions he's made, and would they be able to articulate everyone who loves him what those decisions were that he made that were particular to him that he showed were absolutely fantastic decisions. So Fosenko said, so an analyst saying who's not, who's saying it's a bit of a risky decision. He's not like a pro or anti Zaluzhny person. In fact, he's quite anti the decision, I think. But he says this: he became a myth. He doesn't speak publicly often, and this meant that people started to give him idealized characteristics. I think that's a really fascinating. I love psychology and how that interacts with decisions and with actions, throughout the political landscape. Here is something that I think is of importance in understanding psychology going on with people like you and I. Like we look at Zaluzhny, and I think we've idealized him to a point where he's almost, a mythic cultic figure. But actually, is that based on rational evaluation of the decisions he's made, or are we receiving that there's been this kind of hysteria of how good he is, and we get these ideas sort of from other people, but actually when we drill down to how much we know about Zaluzhny and the decisions he's made, I don't know if that is fully justified. However, he is definitely popular among the troops. And I think one of the biggest challenges here for Zelensky is losing the morale of the troops and losing the backing himself personally as a politician in charge, losing the backing of those troops. And this is incredibly, incredibly risky. You've had people like Vitaly Klitschko, who admittedly is not the biggest fan of Zelensky, bit of a political nemesis. Mayor of Kiev has urged the president to explain the decision to remove General Zaluzhny today. And there have been criticisms that actually the reasons he's given have been pretty vague. Here's Vitaly Klitschko's post on Telegram. The translation isn't great. Um, well, actually, I'm not going to go into that. What I'm going to do now is go into Mark Hartling, who is a retired uh, military man from the States. He says many US media outlets proclaiming, quote, Zelensky sacks Zaluzhny or Zaluzhny fired. I don't see it that way. Allow me to provide some context. And he says General Zaluzhny is a 51-year-old, extremely young for a commander of any nation's armed forces. Most four-star generals are in their 60s with much more experience. Since February 22, he's been the tactical, operational, and strategic leader of the toughest fight we've seen in the 21st century. Here's what I mean by tactical, operational, strategic commander. One, he commands the 2,000 plus mile tactical front. Two, he coordinates each battles into an operational campaign plan. Three, he plays the in the strategic arena with his nation's leaders and over 50 supporting nations. But that's not all. He started this war without a fully modernized army as part of the defensive fight and incorporated hundreds of new pieces of equipment as the UAF modernized. Two, he had to ensure the logistic support of all that new stuff. He'd had to find ways to train his forces from privates to generals into the kind of modern fight he has been facing, while simultaneously determining how he could fight effectively with a bevy of modern weapon systems. He's dealt with various personalities and unique nationalities as NATO and the US came together to help him, some offering things he needed, some holding back on things he desperately wanted. Truthfully, he came into this invasion as an inexperienced and untrained senior level commander, and he carried himself as a leader of a great army and an emerging nation. But, and there's always a but, he likely is physically, emotionally, and intellectually exhausted. Commanders of forces get a few hours sleep each night and continuously face problems with no solutions, but he has been masterful in his performance over the last 2+ years, and he'll be studied as a great military leader who excelled during a time of crisis. God bless you, General, he says. It's time for a new commander to take the reins. It's a good call to get some new blood into this new phase of the campaign. So that's what Mark Hartland has said, and you may completely disagree. But it's interesting to note that basically for major commanders of, say, uh, NATO regions or NATO in general or regional areas of, say, the US armed forces, people only generally sort of sit in those positions, controlling all those many things for sort of 3 years. We've got a guy that's been fully in charge since the beginning of the war and previous to that. But so is it unrealistic to expect that someone to be shuffled, to rotate, some kind of rotation of personnel to get new ideas in, to get a new way of thinking, maybe? Or do you just keep plugging away with the same person? Again, he's really popular, and again, I think he's a decent general, but he is relatively inexperienced compared to um, sort of parallels outside of the Ukrainian army. So I, I don't know. Uh, Benefit the doubt to Zelensky, but he's going to have a real challenge on his hand with managing both PR in the outside world and also PR within the armed forces with the soldiers themselves who are incredibly loyal. Loads of people on social media within the armed forces in Ukraine have put up, when there's like the Charlie Hebdo attacks on France, everyone puts up on Facebook the French flag, and when there's this, this event here, people change their avatars, and everyone on Facebook, I think, in the armed forces in Ukraine is changing their avatar to Zaluzhny images and whatnot. So I think there's going to have to be some serious PR management, and I think that goes to what Vitaly Klitschko is saying there, in that there needs to be some clarity in the kind of vagueness that we've seen from the reasons behind the movement. Rustev Umarov was interesting as as the defense minister coming out and saying, giving a couple of reasons, saying that actually Zaluzhny was doing um, deals with international partners that wasn't through the Ministry of Defence, and that was potentially a bit of an issue. Um, and a few other bits and pieces. So, uh, yeah, these things are complicated. There's probably many reasons, and there could well just also be a clash of personalities. I don't know, and that's not a good thing when those two personalities are incredibly important positions, like the president of a country and the commander in chief of the military, when the country is involved in a massive war. Yes, Max23 here says about Umarov Zaluzhny directly negotiated with allies on supplies, excluding Ministry of Defense from the process, and considered Zelensky's orders unrealistic. That's according to the Times, citing Umarov. Umarov named another reason for Zaluzhny's dismissal: failure to provide a military plan for 2024. I mean, that if that's true, that is kind of weird. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm sure after the dust settles, we'll have a much better idea. But this is going to be really challenging for the Ukrainians at the moment. Just in, yeah, it's going to be challenging. I guess would it be super challenging for the actual war effort? I don't know if it'll make any immediate differences on the front line, but it will affect those soldiers' morale. So that is definitely worth considering. Anyway, let me know what you think. I'm sure this is going to be really divisive. In fact, I'm pretty sure most of you will be pretty angry with Zelensky for what he has done. Anyway, put your comments in the threads below.